Good morning, everybody. How are you all doing today? So, as mentioned in the Facebook and Instagram and whatnot, all those posts, today I'm going to be working on the Crossguard 2.0 by Korbanth / Parks. I have got one sitting right now in front of me, disassembled. So, the first thing I'm going to do is get the basic geometry of the internal space that's I'm thinking is going to be usable space for our install. One thing I will mention is that these chassis that I'm going to design, I'm going to have two chassis variants. The first one is going to be a crystal reveal using the magnetic doors, and the second one will be a hot swap battery if you're doing NeoPixels, or if you're going to be at a con all day, anything where you need to be able to quickly switch power cells to avoid having to charge for several hours to get your runtime back up. But as I mentioned, I am going to do, this is going to be mods required. these chassis. Now, they're going to be very simple, easy things that anybody can do. But my goal is to get the two little red buttons to be switches, so that we can run two boards that require two switches, such as the higher tier Nigon and Plector boards, as well as the Teensy boards, and the Stardust board is another one that can use two switches. And the switch spot that is currently existing will be converted over to represent or to house a recharge port. And again, I'm going to make these as simple as possible so that anybody can do them with just, you know, a little bit of filing or Dremel work, because after looking at this thing, it doesn't look too complicated. So, without any further ado, let's go ahead and get started. I've got a new part opened up here. I'd like to say a quick thank you to the people who have tuned in so far. Appreciate you joining me. And if at any point you have any suggestions, feel free to let me know. You will have to forgive me. I need to hop up for just a quick second. I will be right back. My apologies. Alright, sorry about that. I completely forgot that I moved my calipers from their usual place in order to use them elsewhere, but I've got them now. We are good to go. So it looks like the ID of this hilt is a little over an inch. About an inch and 10 thousandths that side. Inch and 12 thousandths that side. So we're just going to go with a 1-inch OD chassis because, thank you, Corvin. That 12 thousandths is plenty of clearance. We should get, I may even go 1-inch 5 just so it's a nice snug fit. Now, because I only have a pair of 6-inch calipers and not an 8-inch or 10-inch pair, I am going to have to figure out the length of this by measuring it in sections and adding them together. So my first section is 2 inches and 85 thousandths. The next section, this is the section that will house either the battery or the crystal reveal, depending on which chassis version you prefer, is 3 inches 85 thousandths. The last section of the main body is 3 inches 30 thousandths. So that gets a total length of 8.2 inches. Now, the one thing that I'm debating, I know for sure that I would like to create a new set of inserts for these that can be printed in metal for the pommel and the gash section up at the top. Now I'm trying to decide if I want to incorporate that as a part of the chassis or have it be extraneous, so to speak, where it's added in after the chassis is completed. Now, looking at this pommel section, it would be possible to put in a. I think it would be possible just by a little bit, just barely, to put in a 28mm speaker. But you'd have to go in from the very back and somehow get it into your chassis that way, which, unless I just put the entire chassis in, have it go in from the back once the pommel section of the saber is attached, I'm not sure how well that would work out. Alright, so we do have some additional clearance in here that I think I can use to accomplish my goal. Yeah, I think I'm gonna try for that. We're gonna go for the 28mm speaker, and an all-in-one piece. So that I'm just gonna leave as it is, and this next section of chassis, I'm just making it as a blank right now. I will make larger. Those of you who watch sometimes probably notice the music is more than a little bit different than what I usually listen to. Unfortunately, I've been getting copyright issues listening to classical music because, as it turns out, while the composition itself is not copyright protected, certain recordings of them are. So I've been unable to upload certain videos to YouTube because of that and whatnot. So what I'm listening today is a playlist that is supposed to be entirely copyright free. So hopefully we don't have that issue any further. Looks like our max diameter is going to be just a little under 1.25 inches. So I'm going to go ahead and pop in like so. And the length of this is going to be a little bit harder to determine just because of how far down inside the hilt it is. Glad you are enjoying it, Kristen. Looks like our max acceptable length for that is going to be about 1/4 inch. But I would like to leave a little bit of extra space. So instead we're going to go with about 1/8 of an inch, about half. Like so. Excuse me. Alright. With that in mind, I can then measure the distance from the end of the body to the end of the pommel, which is 1 inch 425 thousandths. I will grab a calculator here. Now we need to start by subtracting the 1/8 inch we just added right here. And the next thing is going to be to subtract the thickness of the threaded section of the pommel. And this is going to be an entirely different part. I'm just going ahead and getting the dimensions for it while I'm in rough dimensioning mode. This will be the pommel insert that will be as a replacement for the existing parts. And that is 1/4 inch exactly. So I'm going to subtract another 1/4 inch from that number. And we end up with 1 inch and 50 thousandths. So I'm just going to jot that down real quick so that I have that on hand when it comes time to work on that part. Perfect. Alright, the first thing I'm going to do here is I'm going to go ahead and make the cutout or mark out where the battery is going to sit because I'm going to do the battery version first, as I have an active commission for that version of this chassis and no active commissions for the crystal chamber version, though I do predict that will be the more popular version of the chassis. So I'm going to pop over here to my front plane. Just rough sketch it in there. Now I'm going to use my dimensioning tool to locate this thing. So that's the same dimension as our first measurement, which is about 2 inch 85 thousandths, if I remember correctly. I'm just going to double check that real quick. Yes, 2 inches 85 thousandths. And the total width of it is then 3 inches 85 thousandths. And now we have the location and rough cut for our battery holder / crystal chamber area. Next thing I want to take care of is, for those of you who haven't received yours yet, there is a small screw holding that sticks through into this chassis area. There are 2 of them. They hold in place some of the wire clips that hold the red wire that go along the outside of the body of the saber. So I need to make a cut that will clear those as we insert the chassis. Since the chassis is larger on this end and we are going to try and fit a 28mm speaker in there, it will have to be inserted going in this direction. So the cut needs to start on this end and go that direction. So I'm going to come normal to this face here. And open up a new sketch. Now I'm just going to measure the exact head size of the screw to make sure that nothing is going to create any interferences. It looks to be a little more than 200 thousandths wide, and the thickness of it is approximately 60 thousandths. So I'm going to start by drawing in the general shape of the screw, and then I will locate it. It's going to look something like this. Now I am going to add a little bit to each of these dimensions. So for this one, I'm going to go, instead of 200 thousandths, I'm going to go 225. And the distance here is going to be 75 thousandths. Okay. Now I believe these things are at a 45-degree angle from the parallel of the flat. And I'm just going to verify that real quick. Okay, so they are actually not at 45. It looks closer to 60. Interesting. Let's go ahead and sketch this in and see what we're looking at here. I'm going to make sure that this is collinear to that so that I can add a horizontally fixed line and use that to create an angle without messing up my geometry. I should be able to move the entirety thing just by adjusting this here. Like so. Alrighty, that is in the correct location. So, because this is just representational of the actual screw head, and as you can see there's going to be some space underneath, I'm going to switch that to a 4 construction line. And go ahead and finish out that cut geometry. I'm just going to go right up to here where the battery section ends. The screws are, if I just had to eyeball it, I would say it's about 1/4 of an inch in front of there. But this is going to be hidden anyway, and it does not hurt us to have plenty of space. It's a non-critical dimension, so to speak. So, battery's going to go here. I think I'll put the board in the back. It might be a little bit easier to access that way if you needed to change the... Or you know what? A battery is short enough that I might be able to just build in SD card access into this area as well as a removable battery. Now there's an idea. I'm going to go ahead and just draw a quick sketch on here. Two and 3/4 of an inch gives us plenty of space to work with in terms of a battery. 18650, that is. And it doesn't look like there's going to be quite enough space. You need about 600 thousandths of space to get an SD card in and out, and we only have about 340. So unfortunately, while that's a great idea, it's a good thought, it won't work unless I get out the SD card extenders, which I have a couple of those. They're kind of hard to track down and get a hold of. It's basically like an extension cable for the SD card. Plug it into the board, and then the SD card plugs into the end. And what I could do with that is, instead of having the SD card oriented this way, I would orient it that way in there. And then of course it does not take up nearly as much space. It only takes about 200 thousandths with that extender, which fits in nicely into our 340. So here's what I'm going to do. I will make that an option. I will model in the board. I still think I'm going to go in this section. Or no, it probably makes more sense to put it up top, just so that there's less wires running across the bottom here. We will only have to deal with the negative battery and the speaker wires. This entire area here is going to be pretty much useless. When I do the crystal chamber version, that won't be the case, because we'll have a board and then a crystal chamber, and then our battery is going to be about like so. It's going to stick out a little ways into that area. It's possible. This hilt has plenty of space. I may just do a third variant. Put a crystal focus and color extender back here, and then you won't be able to hot swap the battery, but this is enough space to do a dual 18650 pack for 7.4 volt setups. So that's something I will work on a little bit down the line. Alright, so board, we're going to do the board up here on this one. Hop out of that test sketch I just had. And I'm going to open up a new sketch on the top plane. Now, I will be willing to do different versions of this chassis as requested, but for right now, I'm going to do a version for the Nigon boards, as that is what is relating to my commission. I think I'll probably do Prism when I do the Crystal Chamber version, and then of course, as I mentioned, I may do a 7.4 volt pack version for the Crystal Focus / Color Extender. So I'm just going to get this to the rough size of an NEC board, which is about, if I remember correctly, you know what, why don't I just open up my model and check. Alright, so as you can see here, I've got a rough model of the Nigon boards, kindly provided by Scott. I'm just going to verify the size on that thing. Okay, we've got 2.09 and 0.865. So I'm going to hide that guy, pop right back over here into the chassis, and add those dimensions. Now I do want to make sure this is way too close to that edge. That edge either needs to be gone away entirely or much thicker, and I think what I'm going to do is make it thicker. That way, if I set this board back in far enough, it still will probably be possible to get this SD card out with a little bit of tweezers work. If one were to move the battery down and out of the way, just pop the battery out of the holder, I think it might be possible. So we're going to shoot for that. So we had about 340 thousandths, and you need about 600 to get a SD card out, in and out effectively. So the difference there is 260. I'm going to go 270. Alright. So now what I want to do is I'm going to use my offset tool. First thing I'm going to do is I'm going to switch the dimension. I'm going to set it to go through everything. I'm now going to use my offset tool here to figure out approximately where this guy comes out. Looks like it is just shy of 250 thousandths, which that works for me. And then I'm going to use my second direction to have the depth of the board calculated, which is about 65 thousandths. It's 1 millimeter, which is it's a millimeter and a half. But I'm going to add a little bit of extra and go 70 thousandths. That's going to get us a nice board cavity. I'm going to hop normal to this guy again, and I'm going to bring back up my... Whoop, wrong one. I'm going to bring back up my model of the board here and establish the location of this SD card. Alright, so we are approximately 125 thousandths there, and 260 thousandths there. As always, I'm going to add a little extra. This time I'm just going to pop that guy right over to the side. Open up a new sketch here and draw in a rectangle. So our long dimension is going to be up here on the top. It was about 260 thousandths, so I'm going to say, drop that down, 250 thousandths. And the same thing on this side, we had about 1/8 of an inch, so I'm just going to drop it down to about 115 thou. Now that's the location of our SD card. It's not necessary because I'm picky. I'm just going to pop that right to there. And then create another extruded cut that goes through everything in that direction. So now, depending on how far down we can get this battery to sit, that may or may not give us the SD card access that we're looking for. I may Alright, in order to use the keystone holders, I can't very well use the JST connector batteries because there aren't very many good high amperage batteries, and I mean, part of the purpose of this is so that we can have NeoPixel going on. So I think I'm just going to plan on using the little keystone battery holders and just sitting it as far back and down as I possibly can. Ben, thank you for hosting. I appreciate that. Alright, so I don't have one of these on hand. I haven't done a removable build, a removable battery style build before. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to hop over here. Or you know what I can do? I was going to pull up the dimensions online, but I think I'll get a better result and I'll be happier with it if I use an actual physical keystone holder. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to run upstairs and grab my Vader's Vault Ardent, and we'll measure the battery holder out of that. So, once again, I'll be back shortly.
Show me how to get to know someone like you, someone like you. I want you to know me, 'cause I know then you'll see we could be true, we can be true. I want you to see what I see in us, something so real, something so real. I want you to see that this is a love that we both feel, that we both feel. And how will we ever know if the love will ever grow without trying, without trying? And how will we ever see if we are meant to be? It's terrifying, it's terrifying. this ain't the same. They say love heals all, it makes it all alright. In time, my heart still feels the breaking, but you make my world so bright. It feels so right, it feels so right. And how will we ever feel that what we've got is real? There's no denying, there's no denying. And how will we ever see if we are meant to be? It's terrifying, it's terrifying. And how will we ever know if the love will ever grow without trying, without trying? And how will we ever see if we are meant to be? It's terrifying, it's terrifying. That we're meant to be. We're meant to be. That we're meant to be. We're meant to be.
You call me a sinner, I call myself a saint. Living the hallelujah, today we close to pray. I'm feeling all happy, don't care about the
Alright, once again, my apologies for the delay, and thank you for your patience. So, let's go ahead and sketch a rough rectangle, and then throw a measure on this thing. Alright, so it looks like we've got, or you know what I'm going to do first is I'm going to make sure this thing stays centered. So I'm just going to apply a midpoint relation here, and it's already got a midpoint relation with this line. So now that thing is going to stay centered. So it looks like our width is about, let's go with 0.82. That ought to give us a little bit of clearance. It's slightly slimmer than that. Length, okay. So it turns out this thing is actually really long, which I did not foresee. In fact, as you can tell, it is too long for the holder. I may end up having to go with the JST connector solution anyways. Now, if I were to center this length, I mean, the battery itself is not that long, so in theory you'd still be able to get the battery out. Tricky, tricky. I'm doing a little quick calculator work real quick. Sorry, Corvine. Thanks for calling me out on that. I forgot to unmute it after I ran and grabbed that battery holder. Either that or I maybe just bumped the button. Anyway, in case you didn't catch it, the reason why it was really long at the beginning was I was a fool and put my decimal point in the wrong place. But this is going to work a lot better. What I'm doing now is I'm just determining how deep I can go with this thing, and I was speculating on my wall thickness, but I think it's not going to be an issue here. In fact, I may actually cut it out. So I'm going to go ahead and edit this thing, and we have 275 thousandths going in the downwards direction. So that leaves 310. So I'm going to go direction 2, and we're going to add 310 thousandths. Okay, that's popping through a little bit, but the corners of this thing are tapered. So instead of going it this way, I think I'm going to just draw the profile on the side, so that we can get the exact geometry of those tapers. Alright, it looks like our width at the top is approximately 625 thousandths. It's a little smaller than that, but once again, never hurts to add a little extra. I'm going to draw in another center line. That represents half of my total height. So that's 0.585 over 2. Got about 295 thousandths approximately. And that's where I'm going to sit the ends of these buggers. Like so. Alright, so we are now fitting a lot happier in there. That is where our battery holder is going to sit. Now I'm going to go ahead and add a nice big chamfer to each of these edges here, so that I don't miss out, or so that it's easier to get that holder in place. That ought to be plenty. Now the other thing I mentioned I was going to do was I'm going to edit this sketch a little bit so that we have a little bit more to hold that thing in place. So I'm going to change this guy here, make him a little shorter. Add about 1/8 of an inch there. I now have to edit that other sketch as swapping the geometry on that bad boy has caused some funky stuff. Aha! Okay. So I'm just going to do that for now. What I forgot to account for was the depth of this thing. So I need to add about 125 thousandths here, which gets us to 0.4. There we go. That's what we're looking for. Alrighty. I may, due to myself keeping deciding on changing the geometry here, I think I'm just going to establish yeah, I'm just going to go ahead and do the entire setup on this face here. So I'm going to close that, get rid of this, get rid of that, and get rid of that as well, and that as well. We're going to sketch directly on this face here. Just gonna get the rough geometry in place real quick, and then I will start dimensioning. So, total height is going to be 595 thousandths. Give ourselves a little extra here. Total width. Let me check that again. Don't remember what that was. We'll go with that. Last thing I want to do is position it. So I'm going to pop a reference right there. And smart dimension from here to there as 275 thousandths. So we're going to go 150 thousandths that direction. And in this direction we will go 2.3 0.99. Maybe. I think I missed my decimal again. That's better. Alrighty. This is why we double check things. I seem to be excellent at missing today. Now I still do need to add a sketch for a cut going this direction in order to get rid of this little lip that we've got. Boink. Alright, now we can actually get this thing to fit in. Once again, I'm going to go ahead and chamfer these. Like so. And while I'm at it, I will also add a chamfer here. Make this one a little bigger. Let's do that. That ought to be plenty to get us to get the battery holder down in there. Now, as I mentioned, and as you can see when I move it, it's a very thin wall there, so thin that it's kind of rendering funny. So I'm just going to go ahead and cut that wall out entirely so that it doesn't create a print issue. Up to surface cut. Saves me from having to do any sort of math or anything annoying like that. Alright, we've just got our little cuts right here. These won't harm anything. We still have plenty of material holding that battery holder in place. Now, something else I'm going to do is I'm going to add a little groove so that there you can glue in a little ribbon to make it easier to get the battery in and out. I think I'll do that right about here. And then when the battery's put in, you'll just have to make sure the polarity is such that it's going to be easier to pull from this end. So let's go normal to my front plane. Create a new sketch. Let's go 3/8 of an inch here. And we'll make the groove 1/2 inch wide. Doesn't need to be super deep. Let's go 50 thousandths. Alright, you should now, the user is now able to glue a ribbon in here and have it thread up under the battery and out over to the other side. So you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to make this look just a little better by restricting this guy. Instead of going all the way around, we are only going to go until it runs back into this thing here, which is going to be about 300 degrees-ish. Let's change the direction of it. Ah, it was close. We're going to go with 305. Alright, so that gives, that means we're not cutting into this guy at all. There's still plenty of room to glue your ribbon here, and the tail can sit right in this little section. That ought to work nicely. And in all honesty, I'm going to make this a little shallower because that's pretty daggum thick for that ribbon. Perfect. I like that. I like that. It's working out nicely. Now, this thing up here is definitely, because of the size of the battery holder, you're definitely not going to be able to get that out of there. So what I may try to do is, I'm gonna try to be tricky here. I'm gonna modify this to where the board is gonna sit at an angle like that, so that we can hopefully get our XD card out going that way, and it clears the top of the battery holder. But in order to see if that's even going to be possible, I would first like to get just a solid visual on the size of the battery holder itself. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and go into the assembly stage here. I'm going to create a new file that's actually going to be a collection of files. But first I want to save this one. Let's create a new folder here. You guys can't see any of the dialog boxes that pop up, but I am just creating a new folder within my models directory. Alright, got that thing saved. New assembly file. Insert this dude here, like so. And now I'm going to real quick model the battery holder itself. I'm going to save myself a little bit of time by just copying this sketch here. And popping it right in like so. Now I'm going to double check my total length here because as with everything I did add just a little bit. We've got, okay, this is in millimeters. 77.2 millimeters, which works out to 3.04 inches. Let's draw another sketch on here. Now this is definitely not an easy measurement to make here. I'm gonna go ahead and start by dimensioning this guy. Gonna be about like so, and I'm thinking it looks like it's about 80, or maybe not quite that much. Hang on. That's pretty close to, that's sitting pretty dadgum close down here. We'll set it at about 25 thousandths. Alright, so we now have a rough approximation of our battery holder and a battery inside said battery holder. Before I'm going to go ahead and add the little tabs on the bottom, just so I don't forget to work those into the chassis area. Okay, so the distance, I'm just going to do this by sketching out a rectangle right in the middle. And dimensioning it properly. And now I can add my little bosses. And those are going to go out like so. That's a very, very rough approximation, but it's good enough to get our dimensions set in there. And before I forget, I'm going to save this real quick. Gonna go to my shared folder where I have all my speakers, buttons, LEDs, batteries, soundboards, etc., etc. Some heat sinks, cover text, different switches, 440 rods, all that kind of stuff. And save that dude. Now I'm just going to use the same sketch. I'm just going to come over here to this one and copy it. Sketch on this plane right here. Got to add a center line. I would definitely recommend the washing of the fingers. It sounds like a good step. Find our midpoint, just like so. Perfect. Now this time I'm going to use an offset. Not a very big one. Let's go about 50 thousandths. And then, you know what, let's go a little deeper. Change my offset direction. Oh, look at that. We are poking through. So we're definitely gonna have to do a little bit of filing in order to get this thing to fit. A little bit, just gonna knock those pegs down a little bit. So again, that's an easy step to do though. So being that they poke through most of the way, I'm just gonna go ahead and say, yep, you can go through all of the way. Welcome back, Ben. Got done a little modding. What did you modify today? Ah, I see. See, I would just call that weathering. That in mind, though, I'm still curious as to what you worked on. Yeah, the coffee trick. I have used the coffee trick before. It's a nifty little coffee trick. I like that trick. I think that'll do for us. As I mentioned, these are going to stick out. We'll have to be filed off a little bit, but it shouldn't be too much of an issue. I'm going to pop back over here, and now I'm going to add this battery. Are you prepping up, Ben, for the same convention coming up in a couple weeks that Corvin has been telling me about? Sounds like a lot of fun. Alright, so our battery, if it's where I measured correctly, clears by, that's a good 60 thousandths, 70 thousandths or so. So we do have a little bit of extra space in case I measured wrongly. Wasteland Wildling. Oh boy. You know what? I'm going to open up this guy real quick and add a little bit of color. Because who doesn't love a little bit of color? I'm going to use low gloss black. And then I will add I'll just go ahead. I'll make the battery green. There we go. Looks a little bit prettier. As I mentioned, these are going to have to be filed down, but for the sake of the reference model, I'm just going to leave them long. Oh, look at that. I guess that's something important that ought to be noted. Is the orientation of those pegs. This is going to take a little bit of thinking. So, assuming... Alright, so the spring tab is going to be our negative side, and that's the side we want over here. So, if I'm looking at it from the top, the holder is correct, the chassis is not. Okay. Go ahead, fix that real quick. Yeah, I can see how having a term for that would be very useful. Oh, no, 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 it's not a rotate, it's a flip. I would love to come and see it. I just have, unfortunately, a bunch of stuff going on here, and not the cash to get there. But maybe some other time, maybe some other year. There we go. That ought to fix it. Okay. Now our holes line up with our pegs. Good stuff, that. Getting this board to have an easy access SD card is definitely going to be tricky, but I still think that it might be doable. What I'll have to do is I'm going to scoot the thing closer to the battery, actually. And as I mentioned, put it in a bit of an angle. That may give us the clearance necessary. We'll see. How about that? I see I've got a couple new viewers on YouTube. Thanks, guys, for tuning in. You know what I'm going to do? I'm going to do some sketching directly in the assembly file just so I can get my numbers exact. Okay, so I need to fit it in between here and here. So I'm going to go ahead and just rough draw an SD card here. That I can then manipulate. Thickness is about 35 thousandths, and length is, there we go, okay, and then attached to this thing, I'm going to go ahead and throw in a board reference. Let's go about 85 thousandths to allow for the clearance between the SD card and the board. And it sits usually about 25 thousandths proud of the board. Let's go 50 just to be on the safe side. And with the NEC board, we're looking at a length of 2.9. So that's definitely a possibility. If I extend this line out, as of right now, we're going to hit. Make these two guys collinear, and you can see we're going to hit that battery at this time. If I do that, I won't hit the battery though. I definitely want this to be... Oh my goodness gracious. Okay. It's the problem with not having anything nicely dimensioned. It wiggles all over the place. I'm going to set this dimension as 50 thousandths. And then let's see what happens when we do this. Okay, that's still going to be funky on me. I'm going to temporarily add a fixed relation to that guy so I can do this a little better. And that's going to clear just... Ooh, it might hit the top though. It might hit the top. So I'm going to go add another reference line here. It's definitely going to fit, and we still have plenty of room down beneath here to cram wires. I think I like this idea. I think this is going to work out fairly well, actually. Just getting it modeled is going to be the pain. Let's go ahead and figure out what angle we're looking at here from horizontal. Looking at about 12 degrees. I'm 50 thousandths here from the edge. Uh-oh. I better gear up. It looks like I'm going to be under attack pretty soon here. Just so that I'm absolutely 100% confirmed on this SD card size, because if this thing is even a little bit different, then everything's got to change. I'm going to go grab one real quick. Be right back. Corvin, I think what he's saying is he's going to kidnap me and take me over there to Germany to visit you guys. Excuse me. Alright. So, that's okay? I don't think that's okay. Might be fun for a little while, but I do have stuff to do. I'm gonna go ahead. I'm just gonna. I got that SD card. I'm gonna go ahead and make this just a little thicker. Excuse me. Wow. Okay, it's still gonna clear everything. Tweezers are definitely gonna be your friend with this thing. I'll never get hungry and always have cats. That doesn't sound too bad. Gotta figure out how I want to model this thing now. Alright, here's what I think I'm gonna do. I'm gonna just keep refining this sketch a little bit until I have a solid set of dimensions, and then I will just copy paste this sketch directly over. Actually, I might. I'm going to make this a little longer just so that it gives us, by default, gives me the clearance I need. I'm going to add 10 thousandths to that guy. I do definitely want to travel at some point, and Germany is definitely on the list. So you're not entirely wrong there, Corbin. There are lots of places I'd love to visit. While I'm at it, I'm just going to go ahead and verify these other dimensions real quick. That one's correct. That one could stand to be slightly larger. Find our happy place here. Still clearing. Excellent. Seems like 12 degrees is a magical number for this thing. Scoot this down a hair, kind of split the difference a little better. I think I can work with this. I can work with this for sure. one last thing. And then I will have everything I need to get this in place. Okay, I should be able to just grab these perimeter lines here now. Excuse me. This is a rather important call. I have to take this real quick. My apologies. Sorry about that. Got that handled. So I'm going to remove this entirely, because don't need that anymore. As you can see, I've just copied that geometry over. I'm going to create a snap to location here at the corner. Get my trim tool out and get rid of this little extra bit I don't need. Uh-oh. Haha. You goof. Okay, look at this. Somehow this got a little funky while I was working on it. And we no longer have our parallel relations. Okay, so I'm just going to delete this. Close that sketch. Yes. And fix this guy. Alright, it's telling me I have an error somewhere with something relating to something that doesn't exist. So I'm going to go ahead and show my sketch relations so I can find that. Aha, there we go. Alright, that seems to have fixed it. Let's go ahead and copy these parts again. In the correct geometry this time. Come back over here, and now let's do the sketch again. That looks much happier. I like that. I like that. Alright, so I'm going to use my... Oh boy, I did not think about width. I may have to reset this thing. Try and start steepen the angle. So I can get it set further down in there. Yeah, as you can see, we don't have the full width up here at the top. Okay, so back to the drawing board, so to speak. I'm going to go ahead and roll that back so we don't have to deal with that geometry while we're sketching. Okay, so here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to create a reference. I'm going to get another sketch that's a reference. I'm going to sketch on this plane. Like so, and set this to be okay. Now that's the lowest or the highest point that we can get and still fit the board inside there. Just throw in a reference line. So this point needs to be below that line. I'm going to go ahead and get rid of this 12-degree angle. Just kind of trying to work this thing. You know what? I'm going to snap that to that line for the time being. Oh dear. Back it up, back it up. This may not fit after all, which is going to be unfortunate. Yep, not gonna fit. Dang! And here I thought I was being smart and had a wonderful idea. The angle is too steep. Once we clear that, that height requirement. That's unfortunate. If this was our nano, it would fit. Unfortunately, it's not a nano. Alright, so what if I'm gonna do some quick measurements real quick here on the hilt. Okay, so here's my thought. If I were to, instead of having the pommel insert be attached to the main chassis, I'm going to have it be attached to the red base piece of the hilt. Or no, that might not work either. It's a promising idea, but okay, so here's another trouble I hadn't quite thought of before. Unless which it looks like it might. If this ring down in the bottom here that the red insert threads into can be removed, that would mean this chassis will work. But if it can't be, well, now see, we've got an issue with getting the chassis past the threads, because the threads are too small for our current chassis geometry to fit. Curious and curiouser. I don't suppose anybody watching has one of these, the Crossguard 2.0. And could tell me whether or not they were able to get their threaded section out, and if so, how they did it. It looks like it ought to come out. It does not look fixed in there. It's definitely a separate part. You have to forgive me for seeming inactive for a moment. I'm just fiddling with this thing, seeing if I can't get it out. Alright, I have shot a message to somebody who looks like they may have been able to get it out. So we'll see where that leads. But for now, we gotta work on something else so as to not waste this time. So I think what I'm gonna I think what I'm going to do is start working on the parts that are going to be necessary for the top half or the top section of this saber. We're going to need, as I mentioned, I'm going to make some replacement inserts that can be printed in metal for a better look than the plastic that came with. I am also going to see about modifying what exactly it's going to take to get this to get to where you can wire up the two red buttons up at the top as switches, because I definitely feel like that's something that is the better option here. My first thought is that it's going to be just a matter of filing off the little nub on those switches and then using either a drill or a Dremel or something to expand the hole that's underneath them large enough to where you can fit a small tactile in there. Probably just one of the variants that's easily available from TCSS. In order to do that, one of these little inserts is going to have to be modified slightly so that you won't be able to see the entirety of the insert anymore. Well, you can't to begin with. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut out or cut away that section I'm going to cut away that section so that you can run wires in there. There's already cutouts made, although once again they'll have to be slightly modified with a file or a Dremel or a mill if you've got one. Slightly modified in order to go for the recharge port up in the top. Which is, I still think that's going to be a better option than having just one switch and a hidden recharge port. Maybe not for this removable battery so much, as that's easy enough to get to just plain swap the battery, but you know, if you've only got one battery, you're still going to want a recharge port. And definitely for the Crystal Reveal version, we're going to want to have a recharge port, somewhere that's easily accessible. It's simple enough to design a rotary kill key that has the correct geometry for the top there. I'm trying to decide if I want to just make a really long kill key so that the recharge port is housed entirely within the chassis area, or bump the recharge part upwards a little bit to where it fits into that hole. My inclination is to go with just a really long kill key so that the chassis is an easier install. The only thing you'd have to worry about that's not just as an all-in-one, you know, that you'd have to be fiddling with and pulling wires through holes and whatever, is going to be those switches. But either way, you'd have to do something about that. Whether or not I use the modified switches or the switch that came with. So, a recessed recharge port it is, which also means I'm going to have to change my plan regarding the soundboard, which isn't really a big deal considering that I'm having to change it anyways. I'm thinking it may be prudent to go for a switch solution that is attached to, I don't know, perhaps a quick release coupler of some sort, so that you can just pull the entire chassis out in order to access the SD card. I am going to move the card from this front section to this back section, and what that's going to allow me to do is it will let me have a little more space up front for the recharge port and the switch mechanism and a heatsink, depending on how that's going to be configured, or the NeoPixel connector if the installee is going that route, or the installer, the end user, I should say. But that does mean I'm going to have to move the battery holder. It's going to stay right here in this area. It's just going to, instead of being inset to this side, it's going to be inset to that side. So, I'm going to roll back a little ways here. And go ahead and make that change. It's going to take, definitely going to take a couple steps to get right. First step completed. Well, that's the wrong sketch. I want to pop forward this guy here and edit him. Edit sketch. Alright. I need to get rid of this relation here, and instead I would like that to be collinear with this guy. Like so. Now let's start working on the chamfers. And those guys are acting up a little as well. Okay, I should be able to come back over here into the assembly file now. And of course, we've got errors. So let's go ahead and just remove, or let's just see if we can edit this one and have it fix the others. Sometimes that's the case. Alright, mates are fixed. Next thing is going to be to relocate our holes. Let's move these bad boys. back to the midpoint of this line. That should be everything, I think. Yep, rolled directly to the end, with the exception of this guy, who is actually, instead of rolling back, I'm going to delete it entirely since we're just moving the board. Okay, that gives us a little bit more space for the board in the back here, as the way it was, I was going to run into it. So I'm thinking that it's going to require a flat speaker as is, just due to the spacing on this thing. You know, I'm going to go ahead and move this a little bit. Like so. I'm more pleased with that. Yes, yes. Alrighty. I suppose the next step is going to be to figure out exactly how much space that board is going to take up. Just for reference's sake, I'm going to grab a speaker model real quick and throw it in there just for the sake of reference. Even though I don't have a speaker holder modeled in yet. I'm going to go ahead and grab both the TCSS premium speaker as well as the Adrian Tan, aka Sabre Essentials 28mm high bass speaker. So I can fiddle with both of those. Let's do this guy first, as he's the one that that I think might not fit. All right, so it would be really close on those tabs. They might fit in there. It would be a really snug fit. But honestly, what I'm more concerned about is the length. So what I'm going to do is measure real quick between there and here. Okay, yeah, that's not enough space for our board, unfortunately. Doesn't quite want to play nice. It's almost, if I were to do a version for Prism Nano Crystal Shard, maybe Teensy, they'd fit. But not this guy. Not the NEC boards. Actually, before I get ahead of myself, I forget sometimes that these are shrinkable per se. They have a little score in the board where you can actually break the board into two parts and then stack them on top of one another in order to get a shorter length. You just have to run a little wiring to reconnect them. So with that in mind, we have 2.05 inches right there. The shortest this board can be is, got my calipers here, 1.76. Again, I'm just going to throw this in here for reference. So as you can see, if that's sitting right there, this line here is where you can break the board. And it does fall short of this guy just barely. Look at that, we're going to have about 100 thousandths of clearance if we do that. This small section will just pop off and sit right up here. I like it. Okay. Now the only concern is these guys here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go grab the actual speaker out of my parts drawer and test fit that real quick, see whether or not it's going to be an option. Corvine, I don't know what UI means. Sorry. An expression of surprise, she says. Alright, so I have the speaker. I don't think it's going to work. However, it may be tweakable to where it works. Yeah, it doesn't quite fit. It's just a little big. Of being surprised. Okay, what was it that surprised you? So I think this is worth doing, because it's simple enough to hacksaw, file, Dremel, your choice of metal removing item. Oh, that you can break the thingy. And just put a couple notches in the end of this thing so that that speaker sits a little happier. The other thing to keep in mind is there may or may not be additional space available depending on how I configure the rest of the pommel setup. It's just, that's fine. There is no issue with that. Ideally, you would say I don't know what it's called. Okay, so I'm looking at doing this to where it just sticks out entirely into that pommel section rather than trying to inset it into the body section. You are excellent at my language, especially compared to my skills at yours, so I would not be concerned about it at all. For anybody watching who does not know Corvine, she and Ben are both German. How I managed to get German fans, I'll never know. Okay, so I definitely think I'm going to go with the inset option. It's going to work out better, even though it will require a little bit of modification. To the body. A little bit of file work, Dremel work will take care of it right quick. Crystals is the end. There is no crystal chamber on this particular model. There will be one on the next version I do, but not on this guy. Alright, so that other gentleman responded to my message saying that he did not, in fact, remove the entire silver ring to paint it black. He just masked off the rest. So that means I gotta rethink my design here a little bit. Not too much, just a little bit. Oh, I see what you're saying, Corvine. And yes, that is true. That is true. I guess then I should say why did they stick around after that? So I'm just going to see if I can neck this down far enough to where it will fit through that thread. We've got about 1.22 as our max diameter going through that thread. So I'm just going to drop this down to 1.21. And that ought to fit nicely. Yeah. And of course, this other flat speaker is an option for anyone who would prefer that. They tend to be slightly louder, not quite as nice sounding, and of course they don't have the good bass frequencies, but they are slightly louder in general, in my experience. That one would just sit directly in this section here. But for now, I'm going to remove that since I don't need both of them sitting in there. And I'm going to go ahead and modify the rest of this thing to accept the speaker. So, the OD. Well, thank you, Kristen. That's very nice of you. This section is about 930 thousandths, but since we've already got a snug fit there. I'm going to go ahead and bump this up a little bit to be about 940, just so it fits a little happier. And 50, why don't we go? You know, I could just pull the measurements off of my model, I'm just now realizing, instead of re-measuring this thing, because I've measured it 1,000 times. And as you can see, I gave myself a little bit of extra room in the back there, but that's going to fit right nice. I'm going to go ahead and get rid of this mate. I'm going to add some new ones real quick. I'm going to make this parallel to this face here. And then instead of having the faces be the mate, I'm going to have what's actually going to be creating the mate right there and right there. Which changes the position only very slightly, but I'm a stickler for accuracy. What sort of thickness am I looking at here? It looks like only like 30-ish thousandths, I would guess. It's 40. That's thick enough for the printer. That will print. If it were 20, I don't know. That would be sketchier. Okay, just the tab slots now. I'm going to give myself plenty of space with these. Wrong type of rectangle. This width is going to be about 1/4 inch, I think. Yep, 1/4 inch. And then I'm going to, for a nice time and cool dude who builds cool stuff. Well, thank you, Ben. I appreciate those compliments. I try to build cool stuff. Usually it works out after a few tries, but sometimes it takes a little while. Ah, I sketched it wrong. Sketched it correctly, just sketched it in the wrong location. That's happier. Okay, okay, okay. You know what? I'm just gonna go that direction as well. May as well create that smooth geometry. Add a little fillet here. Not nearly that large. I like that. That's going to work nicely. And of course I have, as mentioned, I did modify this to where it's going to actually fit now. Actually fitting is always really, really beneficial, if you believe it or not. So looking at this thing, there are... I'm trying to decide... It looks like there's enough stuff going on holes-wise at this thing that we should be able to just swap out one of these retention screws for a longer screw and use it to also secure the chassis. So I don't think I need to worry about doing anything crazy or special for that. So I'm going to go ahead and move on to the board holder. Or as Corvin would say, the thing holder. I'm just giving you a hard time, Corvin. Man, there really is a ton of unused space up here. All that's going up there really is a recharge port. So I'm going to create this, everything is a thingy. I like that. I'm just going to say thingy from now on. So I'm going to go to the thingy and create a thingy. And the first thing I want to do in this thingy is make this thingy visible. That way I won't run into the thingy. I want it to be a dotted thingy. Got to draw the thingy for the thingy. Thingy, it's a universal language. Gonna double check this real quick, make sure that that is the actual dimension of the soundboard. It's actually a little shorter than that, but it doesn't hurt to have a tad extra. Okay. If I remember right, we went offset of 250 thousandths. Let's see, yep, that's right, close. And then I go this way about 70 thousandths. Unfortunately, the board is going to hang off over here a little bit. So here's what I think I'm going to do. Instead of having that 75 thousandths away, I'm going to make it 50 thousandths away. It's still plenty thick of a wall. Or you know what, let's even go 40. 45. And that way the board should sit pretty dadgum close to flush here. And I can add some snap tabs on this end. Actually, why don't I just actually do that? Hang on. Let's back this up. Still gives us a nice big chamfer in order to get that battery holder in place. Just also means that the entirety of the board now sits within within an edge, within a body, so, rather than hanging out off the side. So I'm going to measure this thickness here, which looks to be about 30 thousandths, 20 thousandths is what it is. Okay. It's always hard to gauge on a virtual model. I'm much better at doing it in real life. So I'm going to edit this sketch again, and instead of making a hard dimension there, what I'm going to do is I'm going to put in a center line. On either end of this thing, between the wall and the board cutout, and then I'm going to make those two center lines the same length by using this equal length relation. Go right here and they automatically become the same size, which looks to be about 32 thousandths, which it's not ideal, but it's also printable. I'll have to have my SD card hanging off this end here. I'm going to go ahead and round these edges off a little bit. Throwing thingies? Mostly just knocking them over, but that's also kind of a cat-ish thing to do. I had the body of the saber standing upright on the desk, and I knocked it with my elbow. Alright, that is going to hold the board, or at least that's the rough geometry of it. So I'm going to go ahead and get rid of this dude, remove that part, and I'm going to, well, I'm going to see if I still have my models from back before Scott released those nicer ones, because that one is already split in half. I do still have them. They're not quite as nice. They're a lot rougher geometry, but that should get the job done. And here's our little dude. Our big boy is going to sit right like so. Yoink. See if he's approximately centered in there. Not quite. That'll do. You know what? I'm just going to mate this thing together. Also, it seems to be a little longer than it needs to be. This is an old model. This is from way back. Okay, now it fits in there properly. So, it's not going to be possible to get that SD card out unless the chassis is removed. But as I mentioned, I'm going to do my best to make it an easy removal in terms of how the switches connect. It'll either be just a large chamber so that we can fit a nice chunk of twisted wire in there, you know, a couple extra inches, or some sort of quick connect system. I'm not sure how I'll do it just yet. So this dude, I'm just going to make a large cavity underneath the board, and this guy, as well as the wiring, will just kind of hover in there. So let's go ahead and sketch on this face. Oh, and Sayadriel, try not to get dead. That could be exciting. What I'm doing now is I'm just creating the cut geometry, excuse me, so that we have the board supported where it can afford support and not supported where it can't. Funny how that goes. go 50 thousandths width on that guy. Alrighty, next up we have something at... that's fine. I know who you are. I was just giving you a hard time because, you know, the notification popped up. And I believe this one we're going to run all the way to the end. Also at 50 thousandths. Now I can also, I can reinforce this corner a little bit with something like this. Also at 50 thousandths probably. We're going to go crazy and go 75 thousandths on this one. Alright, let's work on the other side. Which it looks like we're only going to have one support rail here. Alright, now I can just pop in and remove all these connecting lines on the border that come from drawing rectangles over rectangles. Like so, and now I can just cut this in and then we'll have a support structure that's left over. Like so. Beautiful. I'm just going to hollow the rest of it out now. I'm going to draw in the full rectangle. And I'm going to go offset from surface here. 50 thousandths offset. This way we have a nice round bottom there and we maximize our space without getting a thin wall. And that should work rather nicely if I do say so myself. The one thing I will do is I'm going to go ahead and bump the thickness of this guy a little bit. So I'm going to sketch on here, just where the speaker's at. Or you know what? I changed my mind. Excuse me. Oh, I was so sure I was gonna sneeze. I've been robbed. Go ahead and put in some holes for our speaker wires. Try putting in an invisible character at the end. Type in, you're on Windows, right? Okay, so either right before or after your name, type in or hold down the Alt key and then press 0173. And that will put in a character that is recognized by the system, but it appears as nothing. I don't know if Twitch allows special characters or not, though, so it may not work. I've thought about that before. Doing something like... Look at that! Awesome! That is not what I was hoping to do. That's what I was hoping to do. That ought to do. I don't particularly like... Oh, you know what? Hang on. I'm going to change this. I'm going to do this differently. I'm going to, instead of chamfering there... You should text me later, and we will yak about this. Corvine. That's better. I like this better. Yes, definitely. Alright, there's our speaker. I just need to put in a channel underneath this guy now to get all the wires up to the front. Nah, you're all good. I just have a hard time. If I'm gonna be focusing on this, I'm gonna do poorly, and I'm gonna tell you to do stupid things. So don't listen to me if I'm trying to multitask. Make that nice and big so that we can easily get our stuff, our wires all the way through. Bum 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 ba-doo, like so. And that ought to do it. Look at that. We have wire passage. Very nice. Very nice. That's plenty large to get a couple of LED wires through. If you're running common positive on this one, you might want to do a heavier gauge wire and then split it up at the top, just because, you know, it's the three LEDs. I personally, this is going to be, this one in that I'm drawing this chassis for is going to be set up with a, it's going to be set up with DR. I can't remember if he said A or white, amber or white, but either way, it's going to have at all times 4 dark red dye running, and then an additional 3 white running whenever it's in flash on clash or lockup. So it's going to be pulling a decent amount of amperage if the LEDs are running at full efficiency, which sometimes they do, sometimes they don't. But if they're running at full efficiency, it'll be pulling a max of about 7 amps. Honestly, other than the recharge port, that really pretty much does it in terms of functional work on this chassis. Let me see if I'm gonna shoot a message real quick to the guy who this is gonna be for, and ask him if he has any additional special requests. And then while I wait for him to respond to that, I will locate and model in the recharge port. Alright, sent him a message. All right, we'll see what he says in a moment here. This is going to be a little bit tricky to locate where this recharge port is, because it's on a separate piece, so I have to first determine fit up. And then I have to figure out what the tolerance on said fit up is. Alright, so I think if I measure this bad boy, this dimension right here, alright, we've got a dimension right there of 1 inch 260 thousandths. Okay, let's pop to my front plane here, or top plane rather. Add in this dimension that I just measured. And now I should be able to measure the size of the hole and use that to locate the center by making sure that I stay right on the end of that line. Hole looks to be approximately 460 thousandths. That means our diameter is about 230. And we now have our location for the recharge port. Alright, what do I think here? I'm trying to decide whether or not it would be better to use the hardware that comes with the recharge ports or to just thread the chassis itself. Personally, I prefer to thread the chassis itself, but in general, I go with the hardware option as that's more available to more people, and I think that's what I'm going to do here. So I'm going to sketch a... I'm going to open up my reference parts once again, just for reference, and then I'll go ahead and pop them into place once I get them done. I've got my recharge port and my recharge hardware. I also grabbed, that is a representation of the shortest possible you can go on those legs, in case this one does not, the full size one doesn't quite fit. Okay. Measure, evaluate this thickness, which is 85-ish, I think. It's 80, so we go with 85 to ensure we have the right clearance. And the largest diameter on this guy let's go ahead and open him up. Alright, so if we go about 220 thousandths, we will get the clearance we need for that nut. So I'm going to go ahead and sketch over here a rectangle. Okay, so we want to go a distance of 85 thousandths, and I'm going to come from an offset of perfect. Okay. just going to go ahead and I have to build some walls up for this thing. As you can see, it cut all the way through. So I'm just going to go like this, convert those guys, and then offset them by 50 thousandths. Like so. And now we have a nice little flat spot for our nut to sit on. Gotta put a hole in the middle of there for the threads on the recharge port, which is going to be at about 250 thousandths ish. Go ahead and measure this bad boy real quick. 275 thousandths. Okay. Let's do that. That'll give us a little bit of wiggle room. Corvin, earlier you mentioned the music was giving you a summer vibe. This one is literally called Summer Song. As I'm sure you can see by the... I forget sometimes that I try to put up the song, although it is a little glitchy sometimes. Doesn't look like it's showing up right now. Curious. Not sure what's going on there. Having that that active song playing is one of the things I do to try to avoid any copyright issues. Even with something that claims to be no copyright, as this does. It still seems convinced that Spotify is not playing any song. There we go. Yo! It's Greg! How you doing, Greg? Sorry, I had chat minimized for a moment while I was trying to sort out that hardware issue. For the rest of you watching, this guy... Yes, this is going to be Greg's saber. He's the one who requested this particular set of features that I'm working on putting together. So, Greg, what we've got so far is... what I'm working on right now is right here where the recharge port's going to go. Here, why don't I just pull up the assembly file for you? There we go. Now you can see what's going on. We've got a removable battery as requested. along with a spot for a ribbon or something, so it's easier to get in and out for you. The Nygon boards, as you also requested, I did have to split it in half. The Nygon boards have a unique feature in that they are able to be broken in half, or well, not in half, but broken and then wired up with wire instead of the soldered bridges that you can do if they're still in one place in order to save some space. This represents a 28mm high bass Sabre Essential speaker, and it looks like I have a couple extra new viewers other than Greg, so hey guys, how are y'all doing? Thanks for tuning in. I appreciate your patience with me while I tried to sort out that little issue, but we're getting back to the good stuff now. Masterminds? I don't know what you're talking about. Alrighty, so what I'm doing now is I'm just putting together the what would be a good word for this? You know, it's sad when I would know how to say something in German as well as I could in English, which is to say not at all. But point is, I'm making it better. I totally did that backwards, didn't I? Oh no, I was just making a joke that because I didn't know what I was trying to say in English, that I would have had just as much luck if I tried to say it in German. But if you wish, you can tell me how to say this is tough. How would I say this is tough? There are a few things that I feel like could have been improved a little bit. Overall, it's pretty decent though. Speaking about the magnetic door itself, yes, it's a little loose, and that is one of my main concerns with the thing. What I will try to do is I'm going to see about permanently affixing the two halves of the magnetic door together. The way it works, you know, Kristen, I'm gonna go with the first one, Das ist hart, because I have no idea how I would even begin to pronounce that second one. So, Das ist hart, Greg. There are two segments of the magnetic door. The inner section actually has a pretty strong grip, and the outer section is the one that's a little loose. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to see if I can't get those two to be attached together so that you're essentially having this magnetic strength of both of them working as a team. Now that's not going to be an easy thing to do, and I can't make a guarantee that it will work, but that's what I'm going to attempt to do in order to solve that problem. Good question though, good question. So one of the things I decided, Greg, what I'm doing right now in putting this recharge port in is I'm actually putting it in the spot where the switch is intended to be. Once my thought is to, oopsies, I don't know. this is actually going where the original Switch is supposed to go. My plan is to create a rotary kill key that has the same appearance as the greebly that's on the you know, the original saber. What was it? We're going to go 230 minus 80, which gets me down to 150. That's better. Okay, and then I'm going to change the two little greeblies on the thing to be... There are two little greeblies, the little red button-looking things. I'm going to make those into the buttons because it just makes sense for them to be buttons. Also, it will mean I will have two buttons, so you can have a lot easier access to your... I do remember your problems with the word squirrel. With your blaster block and your lockup and that kind of thing. Alright, it does look like the recharge port's going to fit in there without shortening it, so I can go ahead and get rid of this guy. Make sure that we are in fact clearing just by coming straight to this end and looking directly at it. And highlight, let's highlight this guy. Okay, yeah, it looks like we're clearing by quite a lot actually. So I'm going to go ahead and sit this thing up in there a little higher. Give that a whirl. Okay, that's a little too much. We'll split the difference. Definitely fits. Excellent. Honestly, man, what I had planned for yours is there's no crystal reveal at all in your version. What I had done is instead of having a crystal underneath the magnetic plates, what I've done is I've put in this keystone battery holder and a place to attach a ribbon that you can run through the holder underneath. Since I know you want to do troops and stuff with this thing, you can just take a couple extra batteries. If you start to run low, it's going to be super quick and easy to change that battery out. You just pop the magnetic door off, pull the ribbon, and then pop a new battery in, and you're good to go. I am going to make another version of this saber that does have the crystal reveal, but in order to get that quick change battery that you originally requested, I did have to forgo the crystal chamber. Just going to pop that guy in there where he's approximately going to sit. Alright, The last thing I have to do on this portion is, other than detailing it, which honestly I may not even do all that much to this thing because I already have thin walls pretty much everywhere. So I'm not going to gain a whole lot of savings monetarily by cutting out more. I will just start to lose structural strength. There are a few places where I might do some stuff, like I'll make a few cuts here, might make a few cuts up here, but for the most part this is getting really close to finished. The one thing that I do have to do still is I have to verify the size on a max amp so that I can go ahead and get a second speaker in there. This setup, part of the reason why Greg wants a removable battery is, as I mentioned, he wants to go and do troops and stuff, but he's going to be running a dual speaker setup, which is going to, of course, blow through his battery quicker. We'll increase the volume though, so that's going to be neat. And one of these days, I'm gonna have to do like just a total blow your mind con saber with like dual IntelliBlades and a max amp setup. And holy moly, that thing will run for like 10 minutes, but it will be bright and it will be loud. That would be, I mean, honestly, that would just be almost to the point of ridiculous. Glad to hear that that's not going to cause an issue with you, Greg. I thought that's what we had discussed before, but you know, it's always, that never hurts to double check these types of things. Loud is definitely good, Corvine. So I'm going to go and pull up the dimensions of the max amp real quick. I think I may have this as a model, a small board. Not sure though. Alright, it does not look like I do have that model, but I know for sure I have another chassis that I have modeled the max amp for, so I'm going to pull that up real quick and use it to verify the dimensions. Here she is. So as you can see, in this particular instance, what we're looking at is a 28mm premium speaker from TCSS, and because it's a large diameter hilt, there's also a 31mm speaker from Adrian Tan that's in there. Yeah, absolutely, man. As I told you, I mean, never apologize for confirming things. It's much better to ask and make sure than to have something go wrong. So I don't have the max amp put in there like I thought I might. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to use the actual file here and get the dimension, pull the dimensions from that. Close that guy down. Alright, so we have 0.697. That's a good question, Andrew. Had to took me a minute to read through there, so that's what my silence was. It depends a lot on what's going on. Sometimes I do, I design one thing, one chassis, and then I go do other stuff, and then build that thing. But since I don't have a 3D printer of my own, I generally just order from Shapeways. Most of the time, I end up modeling something, and then I'll order it. And then while I wait for that to come in, I'll work on another chassis design, and I'll order that. And then, I'll wait for that to come in. And then once I've got two or three or four chassis in hand, I'll just take a week and just sit down and do only installs for a week. And I generally take a couple of days per week, 2 to 3 days a week, and I go in. I actually get into the machine shop where I do the creation of hilts from scratch, and machine chassis from scratch, as well as modifications to hilts. I'm working on an Ultra Sabers Dominix V4, I think, V4 right now, that it looks nothing like an Ultra Sabers anymore, just because of the amount of machine work I've done to it. So I guess the answer to your question would be sometimes. It kind of varies in the way I approach things, just due to the circumstances and the time frame of what I'm working on. Yeah, it's not concrete, but it works out. Alright, now that I've totally forgotten my dimensions, I'm going to go ahead and create a new file real quick and just rough this thing out so that I have it on hand. I know, I'm excited to see so many people watching. I've got one guy sitting over on YouTube not saying anything, and then I've got 3 to 4 people in Twitch chat being active, so that's great. That's great. There's 5 viewers on Twitch. That's you on YouTube. Okay. Why are you watching on 2 platforms, you goof? Alright, I gotta verify these measurements now. Ah, I guess that makes sense. Well, are you having a fun time reading it so far? That one is 661, remembered that correctly, and this guy 697. Ooh, almost got them both. Let's go like this, 697. I have had people on YouTube before. The day I was doing the installation of the Gary Morris saber, he actually watched that whole process. We had a little bit of a conversation going on there. That was nice. Gotta make this Corvine's favorite color. I'm kind of just eyeballing this. Since I don't have one on hand, I'm just going off of the images online. Yeah, the May the 4th, the May the 4th thing was awesome. I'm definitely going to do that again next year. I think anybody who's ever had any interaction with you ever knows your favorite color. You know, sometimes I think you might be changing your mind, though, and your favorite color, I think, is going to be chrome before too long with how much you're obsessing over Phasma. Honestly, I think this may, I may just have this guy kind of float, like I did this one. It's certainly not going to harm any, maybe... Certainly not going to harm anything sitting down there. So I'm just going to instead save this boy. Make sure it's in the right folder here. And then throw him in. There is more than enough space for those guys to just play happy in there. They're going to sit in there right pretty. Now, neither of these, both of them are, the Max Amp has a little bit of functionality. Both of them have a little bit of functionality to them, but they're both mostly, just transfer stations. You run a wire from the board to that, and then from that straight out, it's the same number of ins and outs and everything. So I think those are going to be just fine sitting in there. Yeah, I really don't see any problems that might arise with that. That being said, I'm just going to take a moment and throw a few cuts in here. I have 2, Ancient Mew. I actually have 3. I've got my modeling program spanned across 2 monitors. You know, I keep my assembly file on one. This is the same thing I do every time I do modeling. I put what I'm working on in the moment over here on the left, which is the monitor that's in the center for me, and then the total file, the assembly file over here. I am looking to hopefully upgrade my setup pretty soon, because this computer is getting old and slow. It would mean I could model faster, I'd get more done, there wouldn't be as much latency in the stream for you guys, and I wouldn't crash as often. Thankfully, I haven't crashed in the past couple of weeks, but a lot of the times this modeling program will just crash the computer. And when that comes up, I am going to have a nice long one. But it's a big old chunk of change, and I'll have to be saving up for a while to get there. I have I learned I've learned. I have my computer set to automatically save all of my open documents every 5 minutes. £1,600, huh, Ancient Mew? Hang on, let me see what that is in dollars. Yeah, I am going to be my stuff is going to be over double that. Yikes. Yeah, Greg, your payments will probably cover one of my nice long monitor. It's kind of expensive, but it's really nice. See, you can get a decent computer for less than that. I'm also counting my monitors, which a nice big monitor like that is on its own is going to be about, let's see, just the monitor I'm looking at is approximately 600 euros, which works out to about 530 pounds. Already got the monitor, nice. Yeah, so when I'm saying that that number is including the monitor, it's including nice. I'm still gonna go with a 3 monitor setup just because I end up doing so much all the time, but only one of them is gonna be that nice one. I'm just gonna get 2, normal standard run-of-the-mill 1080 60 hertz monitors because I don't need anything fancy for those. But my center monitor is gonna be it's 100 hertz. It's a 2K resolution, and it's a 32-inch diagonal, so it's really nice. But as I was saying, that number also includes my audio video equipment that I'm gonna get. I have no cameras, but I did borrow some people's cameras. One of my other streaming buddies. I borrowed his camera for a little while, did a couple live installs and that type of thing, and people really seemed to like that. So I definitely want to get a couple nice cameras that I can hook up. I'm also going to get a small mixing board because every time I have to adjust volumes or mute my microphone or anything like that, it's a giant pain in the butt trying to get in and out of full screen programs. So I'll just be able to hit the mute button. But that is a yeah, it does include other things. What processors and GPU are you running, Ancient Mew? Yeah, thanks, Greg. A lot of people seem to like them, and I enjoy doing them too. So that's part of where my cost is coming from, is from some of those guys. To a very convenient link. Ooh. I have thought about that, Greg, and it's something I would love to do. Unfortunately, it would be awesome to see. The difficulty comes from getting streaming equipment out into the shop. I've thought about getting, like a GoPro or something, but I'd have to get a computer. I wouldn't need anything that has a high processor and graphics like what I'm going to build for my modeling, and I have a gaming channel that I do a couple times a week. But the biggest problem is going to be internet. getting a steady, solid internet in order to have the stream stay, you know, stay live and not stutter. But it's definitely something I'd love to do. But yeah, I definitely, I mean, if I can get internet, Greg, for sure, for sure. Ancient Mew, I will check out your list in a moment here. Oh boy, that sounds exciting, Ben. Okie doke. Got a slight error coming up. Okay, unable to offset one or more sketch entities. Yeah, for sure. I haven't. I know the I know the basic stuff, same as you. You know the majority of what I'm getting, but some of the smaller stuff, I'm not sure. Like for example, I don't know what audio adapter card I'm gonna get because I can't run a little mixing board off of just any old audio card. I have to get one that has an XLR input on it, which is not going to be cheap. I know his job involves like web stuff, and I do appreciate the help he's given me there. I'm still trying to get all of that sorted. I really want a website. It's just something that's a little harder than I'd like to obtain. I didn't know he specialized in like the building of computers and whatnot. I've got a good buddy here locally who does that as well, so I'm all sorts of set. It's just a matter of coming up with the cash pretty much because I have all sorts of good input coming in. Okay. You know what? I think I'm gonna go for a sort of like a Sterling barrel, kind of a cooling drills kind of a look up here. So let's come to the front plane again. Draw a sketch. I need to convert this guy. It's something he knows, but not what he is working at. What's his? I know he got a new job. What's his new job? Is he at work right now, I'm assuming? Installing computers and networks. Yeah, that's pretty much exactly what my buddy here does. Yes, I am talking about Chris. I forgot that I introduced you to the other day when we were playing Battlefront, which was pretty fun. I must admit, that was fun. Once a month. I don't know. That was a lot of time. Um, it's not that I am opposed to playing, it's just that the amount of time it takes in order to get all of you guys at once is tricky because of different time zones. I'd be much more inclined to do something like that if, you know, like a hard and fast something could be set to where we know, you know, instantly exactly what the heck is going on. All right, Greg. Well, thank you very much for watching. I appreciate you having you on. It was also good to get a little feedback from you, as well as it's always just enjoyable chatting with you. So I hope you have an excellent evening, and I'll catch you the next time. Awesome. Thank you so much, Ancient Mew. I really appreciate you having you on. I look forward to seeing both of you on the next stream. Okay. This is the last step on this chassis. After that, I'm going to call it quits for today. I have not stopped for lunch break, and it's already been the normal time I stream. So after I finish this guy, I'm going to call it quits. I may work on the next parts over the week, or I may just stream them next week. We'll have to see. Would create zero thickness geometry. Hey, that's unfortunate. Okay, so here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to move this bad boy Let's see, where is this at? Okay, now I ought to be able to... Yeah, it's almost 2 p.m. There we go. That's what I was hoping for. Very nice, very nice.
I just want to move on, so I have got to be strong. I know I have to go
Okay, now I just gotta rebuild those other features one at a time.
what to do, although I know it hurts you, but I just can't follow through. I've got to let go of you, I've got to let go. I've got to let go of you, I got to let go. I've got to let go of you, I've got to let go of you, got to let go of you.
Okay. That should do what I'm hoping for. Indeed it does. Excellent.
Bring my way out as I go, find who I am as I know, need my own stage in my show. That's why I've got to be who I am, I'm gonna be myself again.
Okay, what the heck just happened there? Better. Maybe? What the heck is this nonsense? There we go. That ought to do it. Yikes. Alright, let's back it up, back it up. There we go. Just about got it. Welcome back. Alright, so now I can get rid of that entirely. And this one as well. Both of those sketches too. What do we got going on here? Boink. And we'll do the same thing over here, just in case that issue pops up again. Ah, I know what it was. That's gonna have caused a problem. There we go, now it's happy. That ought to work out nicely. It looks like that's about finished, folks. I'll have to do... Once it actually comes in, I'll have to verify the fit up. Getting that second speaker in there is going to be interesting. It's going to have to be based off an entirely different part. And I'm not sure how I'm going to run the wires just yet. So, that's something I'm going to have to evaluate and just notch out with a razor knife or something once it shows up. I'm thinking I'm just going to have to run them alongside this guy right here, but we'll see. So, as just a finishing touch to this thing, I'm going to Come to my front plane. One last little sketch here. Go ahead and brand this thing. There we go. Through Vapod armor. I really am having a rough day today, but we got Vapod Saber Armory inscribed on the chassis. I think that's gonna be good to go for this bad boy. So, thank you ever so much to everybody who tuned in today. I really enjoyed having you all around. It's always fun when there's a good chat stream going on. Makes it more fun for me, and I'm sure you as well. So, thanks again for tuning in. I look forward to seeing you all the next time, and I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day, evening, morning, whatever it may be where you're watching. Koyusin.